our third panel as part of Launching New Ventures. Launching New Ventures is a free online course on Coursera.org launched by EPFL, based in Lausanne, Switzerland. It's a 5-week course that goes through the introductory aspects of entrepreneurship. And we're very pleased to have alongside the course these online panels with expert entrepreneurs from around the world. So with me now I have Chris Tucci, our professor and co-instructor of the course in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Hello, everybody.
Chris is over at our College of Management here in Lausanne. And I'm also here with Eric Mikovsky. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah, that's my name, Eric Mijikovsky.
Mijikovsky, excuse me. Eric Mijikovsky, who's joining us from San Francisco. Eric is the CEO of Pebble Technologies and will tell us about his Kickstarter campaign, which was the fastest funded Kickstarter campaign in Kickstarter history. And next we have James McBennett. James, where are you joining us from?
I'm from Dublin. Hello.
James is tuning in from Dublin, so wow, I'm really glad that you're coming in from there. James also funded a campaign successfully on Kickstarter and is a creative entrepreneur working with 3D printing and wood. And last but not least, but in my list right here, I have Johannes Gies, who is the CEO and founder of WeMakeIt.com, which is Switzerland's leading crowdfunding platform. Johannes, where are you joining us from?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is Johannes Gies, and I'm joining you from Zurich.
Zurich, so just across the country from us.
Exactly.
So, perfect. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on the format of the panel. First, I'll be introducing the panelists, and then we'll be getting remarks from the speakers. The way this panel has been organized today has been based on the questions that students have submitted via the Coursera platform. So we're really glad that these experts can directly answer the questions that our entrepreneur students have had. So I will start first with a biography of Eric Mijikovsky. If you're not familiar with Eric Mijikovsky's startup, it's called Pebble Technology. Eric, I'm going to go through a timeline of all of your activities. I think it's such an interesting case study for our students. So you started working on a smartwatch at the University of Waterloo in Canada since the 2000s. You got some angel financing from Tim Draper, but you, and I'm quoting this from the Financial Times article, were unable to raise additional funds, which then brought you to Kickstarter. In Kickstarter, you, within 2 hours of going live, met the $100,000 goal that you had set for yourself, and within 6 days you were the most funded project in the history of Kickstarter to that point. After that, you launched 2 other versions of your Pebble watch, and just now, a few months ago, you beat your own record at becoming the most funded campaign in Kickstarter history. So I think the current number now for your most previous campaign is 78,000 backers pledging $20 million to help bring the project to life. So can you give us a little bit of background on why you turned to crowdfunding and why that was interesting for you?
It was interesting for us because at the time when we were first working on, we had built several watches up until 2012, but in 2012 we put together the designs for Pebble, or what would become Pebble. And we had this great product that we had already tested quite extensively with a smaller market, and we had learned so much from our earlier customers. We had sold about 1,000 of our first watch. So we knew that it would be awesome. We knew that we had something that was very cool, but we were unable to find traditional money at the time. We beat the road down here at Sandhill Road, which is a road that's lined with some of the best venture capitalist firms in the world. And at the time, I probably had spoken to 30 or 40 different investors and was unable to find someone who would sign a term sheet and really put their money where their mouth is. We heard a lot of people who are interested. One thing that entrepreneurs always hear is like, oh, it's a very interesting idea. I want to hear more. I want to learn more. Investors love to keep track of potential investments, and so you'll frequently check in and check back with people. But we found that just never actually converted to money, to the actual thing that we needed as a company to survive. We had about $60,000 left in the bank at that time, and we had heard about this website called Kickstarter, where people posted projects and submitted them to the crowd, and people would be able to kind of vote with their dollars. And we ended up posting our project in April 2012. We had a small user base of about a couple thousand people who we had already talked to, had already got excited, and I think those were the people that started backing us right away, right at the beginning on day one.
Great, that's so interesting. I have a lot of other questions from our students, and we'll come back to you right away. I want to give all the panelists a chance to talk about how they heard of the crowdfunding phenomenon, and then give Professor Chris Tucci a chance to comment on the larger trend. James McBennett, you're also a creative entrepreneur. How did you hear about crowdfunding, and why did you decide to give it a go?
I think I had friends who had done projects previously, and I backed several projects before I guess even came up with the idea of doing my own. So it was through, and I kind of watched their campaigns and sort of participated and seen them go through the month, and I guess that's the way.
So it was primarily through your social contacts, and your project was a stool that you had designed in different varieties that people could download and print at their nearest 3D wood printer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's CNC machining as opposed to 3D printing, but okay. It's just in wood as opposed to in plastic or metal. But yeah, the aim was to test. I kind of had this, I don't know, a lot of interest from in college with all these digital machines and what was the future of digital manufacturing. And I guess there was, several themes that are all, I guess, theories, or they're not tested. One being distributed manufacturing and the idea of just having digital file databases like iTunes of 10 times the amount of designs of woodworking than we currently have. And then there's another forms of the long tail of manufacturing, and there's all these interests of what digital manufacturing would look like. So I just wanted to test a really niche product and see how big was a niche product and go one by one. So the first thing I thought, which was the smallest niche that I could think of, was a rocking stool. And that's, I guess, why I wanted to test that on Kickstarter. And it was kind of a sort of happy experience. I learned a lot from it, and it's good.
That's really interesting. Thanks, James. We'll go back also to more of your learnings about your Kickstarter campaign, which we're finding that all the successful campaigns faced a lot of challenges along the way. What I find interesting in both of your stories is that, Eric, you started using the campaign when the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter, back when it was more for funding creative projects and films. And James, you're also talking about the idea that you were looking at a niche product with very particular tastes. And so, Johannes Gies, could you talk to us about how you discovered crowdfunding? Because We Make It is now one of the leading crowdfunding platforms in Switzerland. It has one of the highest project success rates of all platforms. More than 2/3 of all projects surpass their goals. But it's also quite new, and from what I can see, a lot of creative projects on there primarily. And you yourself are an artist. You yourself are an artist. So could you comment on how you discovered crowdfunding, and whether you see it mostly as an outlet for creative projects or others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you said, I'm an artist, and I've been working as a digital artist for the past 15 years. And I mostly did collaborative installations in the public sphere, combining laser projections with SMS, with video, and so on. And most of my projects, they were collaborative. So the essence of crowdfunding I found already in my art pieces. And for some reason that I really don't know, I always felt like I would like to start some kind of online business. But it's only when crowdfunding became like a buzzword that I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. And that was around 2000, maybe 8, 9. This is when Indiegogo, Kickstarter started. I started to think about, well, is this like is there going to be like one Kickstarter, like one Facebook, or is there going to be another? Is this a different market? And so I came up with the comparison of when we think about eBay. Now, eBay is like a global market platform, and it's the biggest in the world. But in Switzerland, there is one that is 10 times bigger in Switzerland than eBay is. So basically, I thought that crowdfunding works pretty much the same way as there is a lot of projects that are locally, and only a few projects that have like a global appeal, like the Pebble. But about 90% of the projects they are catered to a local crowd. So this is why I decided to start my own crowdfunding platform in Switzerland, and that was in 2012. And then we took it from there. So we're growing every year, and yeah, we're very happy about the development.
Thanks very much, Johannes. We actually have a tutorial coming up in week 4. Now we're in week 3 of the course, where we show our students how to create a project on the We Make It platform. So, yes. By way of introduction, if our viewers are not familiar with Johannes Gies, you actually studied social anthropology and history at the University of Zurich and went and started your own production company, indeed working on these collaborative projects, as you mentioned, for the Swiss government, Credit Suisse, BMW, even very recently having a media installation at the World Economic Forum in Davos. So it's really interesting how this collaborative approach then led you to create this crowdfunding platform. I'd love to go back on more on that later on. I'm wondering, Professor Chris Tucci, if you want to step in now and sort of give us a framework for how to understand crowdfunding in the larger trend of crowdsourcing, because we're talking about a particular type of crowdfunding here, and we have a lot of questions related to that coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big area. I'm very excited about. I mean, I'm spending a lot of my time thinking right now about crowdfunding and crowdsourcing in general, and you know, I think that of course, crowdsourcing is a very old subject. You know, starting with the British House of Parliament or Wanted Dead or Alive in the Wild West. It's not like there's no such thing. We never had it before. But I think lately, because of the internet popularity and the internet boom, we've made it so that people can ask for, at first, asking for input, you know, from crowds, and then slowly moving to asking for expertise from crowds, and then, you know, asking for money from crowds. So that I think that, you know, it's turned into a big trend, and the thing that's very nice about it is the reach aspect of it, so that, you know, we're able to get to a lot of people, either for input, for ideas, evaluations, and or for money. I think that this next week, week 4 of our MOOC, we're going to go into more details than probably anybody wants to know about crowdfunding in general. We're going to go through lots of different types and things like that. So I think we'll cover some of the technicalities of doing a crowdfunding campaign, and we'll also have the tutorial on using We Make It to upload and to actually start your own project on a crowdfunding platform. But I see this as kind of the big trend as getting out using open calls, reaching a large number of people for a variety of different aspects of organizational life and other things as well, and that's going to have some big implication. I think it's already having a big impact on the entrepreneurial area.
Thanks very much, Professor Tucci. So Professor Tucci says that he's going to go into a lot of detail on the intricacies of crowdfunding, crowdfunding, probably more than people want to know. He's being very humble right here. Actually, I didn't read out his bio, but Chris won the Best Paper Award at the Academy of Management on his article, Crowdsourcing as a Solution to Distance Search. So he's an expert on this topic, this larger trend, and will be guiding us through the specific aspect of crowdfunding. So can you just define for us right now what we're talking about in this discussion with our expert entrepreneurs? What kind of crowdfunding are we talking about?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So in general here, crowdfunding is, reaching out to for a project to the larger internet general public for usually some kinds of resources. Now, next week we'll talk a lot about the details of all or nothing type funding, which is usually, I think, what our colleagues here are going to go through today, that they were able to fix a goal, and then you have a certain period of time in which people can make some kinds of resource available to you for getting some things in return, which could be varying from equity, debt, gifts, rewards, pre-sales, etc. And so I don't think we're going to talk right now about equity. We for sure will talk about it next week, but maybe if I saw that some of the people had questions about equity crowdfunding as well. But for now, I think a lot of us were talking about rewards or pre-sales, and they are usually all or nothing, but there are other kinds too, where you keep what you get, etc. So for this particular exercise, I thought these were really great cases of rewards or pre-sales and all or nothing type campaigns. You're muted.
Thanks for that introduction, Professor Tucci. So to clarify, we're talking about reward-based crowdfunding, which, as Professor Tucci said, could also be used as an additional sales channel. So I think this leads us directly into Eric's experience of using a crowdfunding campaign not only as a way to raise money without giving up any equity, but also as a pre-sales channel. So again, to remind our viewers who aren't familiar with your story, you had sold already over 1 million watches and then decided to go back to the Kickstarter community to do the second launch. Can you explain your thinking behind that, the benefits of crowdfunding?
The second time we launched on Kickstarter was probably not the best example of how I think small companies can use it. It was a very unique example, it was something specific for us. But the first time we launched on crowdfunding, I think that was to illustrate the point. It was exactly the moment where we appealed to the community to say we have something really interesting. It needs money to survive. It needs to be able to get funding in order for it to become real. Are you interested? Is the world interested in what we're making? And I think it was a moment where the tens of thousands of people rose up and said, yeah, it's a gadget, it's cool, but it's me, it reflects me, it's something that I would like to try, and people signed up. I think that's a really important facet of crowdfunding, which is, we live in a consumer world. We live in a world inundated with advertising and with brands and with products, and I think it's rare, but some of the best ones spend tens of millions of dollars to try to get you to identify or sign up really to be part of a brand or wear a brand across your chest. And I think crowdfunding is one of those opportunities that small companies and small groups have to kind of level the playing field and ask people, hey, do you want to sign up and do you want to support this? And that was very much our first campaign. The second campaign we did was just 4 months ago now for our second major watch, Pebble Time. Got one. And that we approached from a very different mechanism. We had over a million customers, people who've purchased it before. One of the reasons why we went back to Kickstarter, it was really from, I think, a chance to talk directly to the community that supported us from the beginning. It wasn't necessarily to try to broaden the community massively, but really to forge kind of a direct path to the people who supported us 3 years ago when we launched for the first time on Kickstarter. We wanted to give them a chance to see what we were working on and to, again, ask them if that was something they were interested in. It also turned out to be a fantastic marketing opportunity for us because at the time Apple was just about to launch their new Apple Watch, and it was a chance for us to kind of break into the news in a lot of ways as well.
That's interesting. So you thought that the crowdfunding platform offered a lot more than just the financing aspect. So you mentioned going back to the same community that had supported you. The same thing actually happened with the launch of your first watch, where after your successful crowdfunding campaign, you actually raised Series A financing. So it wasn't directly from the crowdfunding campaign that you were seeking financing, but other things.
Yeah, we did pursue some outside financing, but that was about a year or more later. I would say that, I mean, there's absolutely no way that we could have achieved the success that we have without actually having appealed to the crowd when we did.
Thanks. I'd like to move soon to the idea of challenges with a Kickstarter campaign, because I guess the elephant in the room is that the whole challenge is to set up your crowdfunding campaign, and we'll be going into a couple of pieces of advice from you on how to set up a successful crowdfunding campaign. But I think the misunderstanding is that once you get people to pledge that money on your project, that you're set and that's it. But it seems that once people have put in their pre-orders and pledged their amounts, there's a lot of other work to do. So Eric, I remember reading for Pebble, in a way you were almost challenged by your own success because you had 69,000 backers that wanted to order the first edition. This was a couple years ago, so now you're no longer in the same situation. But with your first launch, they had wanted to pre-order those watches, and since the demand was a lot higher than you had expected, you had to switch from producing that locally to switching to a overseas manufacturer, and that caused some delays, which upset some backers. Can you talk about that challenge and then how you overcame it?
At the time, before we had launched on Kickstarter the first time, we had thought about doing small batch manufacturing at the same facility where we had produced our first watch, but it rapidly became impossible to do that as we saw more and more backers come on board. So we knew what we were doing. I think it's a pretty well walked road to manufacture things in large quantities. I mean, there's many thousands of companies who do that already. So we talked to our friends, we talked to our mentors, we found some experts in the field, talked to them about how small companies can begin to manufacture things, and I think we just put our minds to it. We ended up flying. 3 of us flew to China and lived in China for several months to basically operate in the factory and make sure that things were progressing well. But I'd say that early period, the one thing that held, or one of the major things that held our basically held the project together were the project updates that we posted on a bi-weekly basis to our Kickstarter page. It was an opportunity for us to show, whether people liked it or not, the trials and tribulations of a small company manufacturing things in large quantities. And even now, when I talk to some of our backers who supported us during that first campaign, some people really liked the updates. They really liked being able to see what was going on and experience something. I don't know how many people have watched. There's a TV show in Canada called How It Is Made, where people basically just film the entire production line of various household objects and things. And so for us, it was an opportunity to almost make our own episode of how it's made.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned updates and really keeping your backers informed about what kind of challenges you're running through and what the time frame looks like. So I have open in front of me a Medium article by James McBennett called What I Learned from Kickstarter. James, you also mentioned some of the same points that Eric just mentioned on the challenges after you successfully reach your funding goal. So you mentioned that it takes up to 2 weeks to receive the money, which allows people who made mistakes in entering their payment information to edit it. There are also address changes from the backers, so they maybe put an address but then moved since the campaign started and then have to change that. And then you also talk about something called the courier nightmare, which is basically explaining how hard it was to physically ship the products. And then finally, how some countries are difficult, and you say this, beware of Norway and Switzerland, and I'm gonna, so when you're trying to launch something internationally, you face a lot of surprises when interacting with where your backers are living. So I don't know if you want to talk about all or some of these challenges that you had after you reach your funding goal.
Yeah, so when I started on Kickstarter, let's say my day one, I wasn't near as prepared as I maybe should have been, and I probably only realized that after a couple of days. So a lot of the kind of Kickstarter guides that I'd read, they were about maybe the silver bullets of Kickstarter, or kind of how you master these sort of excellent tactics, and very few of them had sort of talked about the fundamentals of it, and that's kind of what I didn't know. So when it came to the courier issue, when I was describing it there, I said I got all the hard things right and all the easy things wrong, because the hard things I had experience in, I had studied, the manufacturing end and the CNC machining, and everything was just easy. And then they put all the labels on the wrong boxes and lost 20% of the order. So and I had trusted a courier to do that, since he said I can do that. And that's one of the most respectable couriers in Europe. So it was when I talked to some of my friends later who do 50,000 orders a month in e-commerce, they said, yeah, we would never trust a courier to ever do that. So some of those lessons, I guess I learned after making the mistake. And a lot of that blog post was, given I'm going to do another Kickstarter, or knew at that time I was going to do another Kickstarter, I just wanted to remember everything I had learned and not forget it. So it was my own personal diary that was public.
That's interesting. So it sounds like there's a lot of checking and rechecking, and the logistics aspect is very important. I mean, all these things may sound evident to people who have done a crowdfunding campaign before, or even larger companies, but I guess this is a huge learning experience, since crowdfunding seems to appeal to amateurs or individuals that just want to launch a creative project.
I delivered after 2 months, but like a lot of campaigns would have a long period, and as a result, there can be a lot of address changes. And I didn't ask for a phone number either, so I had to email all the backers and get a phone number. And there's just little things like that that were in that blog post.
Well, can you tell us a bit more about your team? How many of you were working on this project, and how long was your campaign?
I've always been individual with an hour or two help from friends. So it's been quite minimal setup.
And how long was your campaign duration?
Oh, I think 40 days. 40
days, which is pretty standard. Johannes, could you comment on some of the differences between WeMakeIt's platform and others, and why you think it might be easier for creatives to use your platform?
Yeah, just let me go back to what James just said. I think there is an interesting aspect about the whole development of crowdfunding. You know, a lot of these problems that we are hearing about now, like the shipping and so on, is because we're like this is like a new economy. And we only see now services popping up, like, for example, BackerKit, who takes the headache out of the whole shipment and courier and customer relationship management stuff. So I think what we are going to see in the next couple of years, and we already see this in the United States, is like a whole new economy growing around those platforms. So crowdfunding is not basically about platforms, but it's like a way of the way as a whole economy changes. And we're in the middle of that change, and it has only just begun. So we're going to see a lot of related services that deal with all the headaches of crowdfunding, because there are plenty in it, like the whole shipping, the whole marketing, the whole communication, so on. So I think we're going to see a lot of development there. Now, to go back to your question, as I told you that we are catering to creatives, to creative projects in Europe, especially in Switzerland, Germany, France, Austria, and for example, you know, most crowdfunding projects in the United States, in China, in Switzerland, they have like a local reach. They're not going to go global just like that. That's happening very, very seldom. So when you choose for your project a local platform, you will have just the right audience there, because we have tens of thousands of potential clients who live just around the corner, who might have heard about you already. You get a lot more exposure on a smaller platform, because just to make it all the way up to on Kickstarter or Indiegogo is a very long way. Mm-hmm. And we have more like a personalized service. So you can talk to us, you can even meet us. You can, we have just in a city like Zurich, we have hundreds and thousands of projects, and people can walk up to our office and we meet them for coffee, give them some advice, so on. So I think there is going to be all these varieties of platforms, and they cater to special circumstances. There's also regulations, of course, like not every country is regulated the same way when it comes to crowdfunding. So I think that's some of the big differences between what we are doing and what basically maybe Kickstarter or Indiegogo or possible in Australia does.
Right.
But it's not either one or the other, but it's going to be like there's going to be a variety. That's the nice thing about it.
Right. So what I'm getting from you is that every platform has its own personality. We Make It as a young company, and every startup has a different personality based on the people who work there. So it sounds like your group of people are very open to creative projects. You try to maintain this personal interaction, and you have that personal flavor. So when people want to create a crowdfunding campaign, they need to look around and see, okay, does this platform cater to the people that would be interested in backing my project, for example? Mm-hmm. So if they're doing a creative project, they should go more to a creative site, or look, is there a crowdfunding platform that was started in my neighborhood that would be more accessible and more relatable, maybe?
Well, it depends. It's not always easy to decide whether your platform, your project has only like a local reach or it has like an international reach. I mean, you can always try and go to one of the big platforms, but we see just our success rate. It's like almost double than what Kickstarter has, because it's more like we just treat projects in a different way. We can take more time. It's just a different approach that we're taking, and I think for 95% of all projects coming from Switzerland, we are the better choice than Kickstarter or Indiegogo would be. But of course, for Pebble, Kickstarter is the better choice. No question. Right. But then, it's also like the whole, like what we're seeing now with Kickstarter developing into like a platform that is very like gadget oriented, and makes there's like the big projects are all either games or gadgets. That doesn't even exist in Switzerland. There are no gadgets coming from Switzerland. No big games coming from Switzerland. No, so you have to adjust. See, okay, what kind of business is rooted here, and then you have to cater to that.
Interesting. So you said also that maybe you have a longer time frame at We Make It. I have there's a list of do's and don'ts published on your website, and one of the pieces of advice your We Make It says is go for a sprint, not a marathon. So 30 to 45 days.
Go for?
Go for a sprint, not a marathon. 30 to 45 days are enough.
Yes.
Chris, do you want to comment on the pros and cons of equity versus reward-based crowdfunding? I mean, what are entrepreneurs potentially giving up in both cases?
Well, first of all, different countries have different rules about the availability and desirability of these different kinds of. Everyone will allow, for the most part, rewards, and everyone will allow or most places will allow in-kind contributions and crowdsourcing and things like that. Whereas equity, the issue that you have there is that you're starting to create, in the eyes of some people, a kind of a public market for your shares of your own company. So you're selling, you're giving up equity in your company, and you're selling it to, it could be several thousand people. Whereas in most countries, the original thinking on this is, well, if I have more than 20 investors, then I'm already a public company. So the regulations are trying to catch up with the practice right now. And there's a few countries, I think the UK and Italy and a couple more maybe, have already said it was okay, and the US is moving in this direction to be able to accept equity. You also have issues about issuing debt. Someone makes you a loan, you pay them back, the interest rates, and you're touching on financial regulations in many of these cases. Also, how do you handle donations, low interest loans or no interest loans, etc. So I think it's a country by country thing. A lot of countries still won't allow you to sell equity over a crowdfunding platform, but it's something that we're keeping an eye on because it is changing, and a lot of countries are thinking about it now and or changing their regulations for how they're gonna handle that.
Chris, can you also, on the topic of regulation, comment on maybe some differences in pre-sales? So if you use crowdfunding to create pre-sales, then would you have to pay taxes on that?
It's tricky, and this is also something that varies from country to country. Presumably you make a corporate entity here. So as soon as you move beyond a small gift by somebody, you're already talking about receiving investments in your company. So sometimes pre-sales, in fact, can be thought of as your corporate revenues, and then you've got your costs, etc. So then in the end, you in fact may have to pay taxes if you run, if you turn a profit, etc. at the end. So there's a lot of tax implications in all of these kinds of crowdfunding things, except maybe for small gifts. And there you're golden, and having a nice reward in the sense of an experiential reward, or I feel good, that's also a reward, right? And in many crowdfunding platforms, that's actually the main traction. I feel good about giving money to this company, and they're doing a good job for the world. No problem. But then you start moving away from there, and you start thinking about a lot of tax and accounting implications, which are going to vary from place to place. So it's something that you need to check in your own local rules and your own countries.
Great. I really like that you talked about why people fund crowdfunding campaigns, whether it is to actually get the reward, whether it's a t-shirt or a stool or a Pebble watch on discount, or whether it's also to feel part of this community, to feel like I helped a startup get off the ground. I'm into the latest gadget. I'm an early adopter. I want to be part of this. What your points also drew me to, Professor Tucci, is the idea of telling a convincing story. So giving a convincing pitch. So it's interesting to me that Eric mentioned at the beginning, you went back to Kickstarter because a combination of things made it an interesting story. So it would also be a way for you to get free press or launch your product in an interesting way. James, I know that you also in your blog post dedicate a lot of time to reaching out to influential bloggers and people that would be interested in covering your campaign, because those people are going to spread the word and send funders back to you. So Eric, I don't know if you want to talk about maybe how you brought across the story. You have a great product. Did you focus on the product as well as the story of making it, or how did it work for you?
PR works in it's not a black magic. It's not a black box. It's pretty straightforward. People want to talk about things that are new, that are shiny, or have a particular kind of linkage with a popular story at the time. So the very first time we launched our product back in 2009, it wasn't when we went on crowdfunding, but it was the first time that we started talking about our product to the world. It was around the time that a lot of municipalities and states were banning cell phone use while driving. They were blocking people from using their cell phones while driving, and that was a big story at the time. California had just done it. New York State had done it a couple months or years before, and so we pitched reporters. We talked to reporters and emailed them a pitch that would talk about the fact that these states and provinces were banning cell phone use while driving, and there was an opportunity to still see who was calling by using a smartwatch. And that was us kind of leveraging an existing trend or an existing story and kind of hitchhiking on that, or latching ourselves to that story. So that's a very useful mechanism for getting the word out about your startup, about your project, about your product. What we did in 2012 when we launched on Kickstarter the first time was we nurtured a relationship with the press beforehand. We it's pretty simple. We love reading blogs ourselves. The people who worked at Pebble, we love the tech blogs. We love reading Reddit and that kind of thing. And so what we did was we actually just reached out to some of the reporters and bloggers that we ourselves enjoyed reading articles from. And it turns out it was not impossible to get in touch with these people. We explained that we were working on a new project. We showed some photos in the first email that we sent, and we explained that we had been longtime readers of their blogs and of their articles, and we thought that because we had been reading them, that this would be interesting to them as well. And not every single person responded, but we got a couple leads, bloggers who would be interested in covering our launch, and we ended up talking to them about 3 or 4 months before we launched on Kickstarter. And this is something that I think a lot of people kind of forget or leave to the last moment, which is how are you going to actually get the word out about your project? Kickstarter, in a lot of ways, is like Craigslist. It's just a public website where you can post something, and it's primarily up to you to share it with the world. No one else is going to do it for you. There's no magic button that brings people to your site. So there's a lot of legwork. There's a lot of hitting the pavement and talking to people, both customers as well as the press.
That's really interesting. So I'm hearing that there's a lot of work prior to launching the campaign, talking to people, getting a lot of no's, getting a lot of unanswered emails. And a lot of creativity behind there too. You had to find an interesting angle with the whole banning of use of cell phones while driving. So this leads me to one of the questions from our students. This is from Olivier, who's based in our city, in Lausanne. He's asking you, how do you explain the huge success of the Kickstarter campaign? What was the main driver of success? So you've mentioned already the press and getting the word out. But you also haven't mentioned the fact that your product is very different. You have a long battery life. I think the first watch had a 7-day battery life, and a very interesting user interface, and the ability to host apps on a completely different operating system.
For us, I think the first time we launched on Kickstarter, there was a very specific reason why it kind of went viral. I think we had played off a couple themes that were going around. So one was crowdfunding itself was new and very shiny, and it was very cool for reporters and bloggers and newspaper writers to write about a small project that kind of went viral. But I think from a consumer standpoint, we did something with our marketing that explained the product in a very strong way. Up until that point, up until 2012, we had been explaining the watch, and my friends can attest to this because I'd been working on it for years up until that point. But it had always been a pretty complicated pitch that we were making. It was this element of the future. It was a smart computer that you wear on your wrist. It was something developers could write apps for, and we realized that was way too complicated. We realized this 4 years in, but luckily before we launched on Kickstarter. So if you look back at our first Kickstarter campaign, you see the page, and it's focused on 3 things. We chose 3 bullet points to talk about. One was the fact that Pebble shows notifications. vibrates when you get an email, call, or SMS. The second one was that it displays, it links to the running or cycling or biking apps that you use on your phone, like Strava or Runkeeper or Endomondo, and lets you see that on your wrist. And the third thing was ridiculously simple, but an underrated feature, and it was being able to control your music. We talked about how you could press play or pause from your wrist or change tracks without having to pull your phone out. Oh, and there was a fourth thing, and it was downloadable watch faces. You could customize your watch face by creating your own design or downloading someone else's. And if you look back at our original page, we literally talked about those four things, and that was it. And I think that was also a very important feature of our first campaign, which was keeping it simple. People spend a very small amount of time paying attention to things on the internet, and by only talking about four things, we were able to make the video quite concise, about 2.5 minutes. And on the page, there was some very simple structure. We didn't try to tell them everything about the watch. We didn't try to tell them everything about us or everything that we were working on. Just 3 or 4 things, kept it simple.
Great. James, do you want to chime in with the pre and post marketing activities that you also engaged in? This would answer a question from Asif Hanafi from Abuja, Nigeria.
So I guess on the media front, I completely agree with Eric about there's a lot of stories that are going on, and it's like, how can you put yourself at the front of that existing story? My favorite example, just because it sort of illustrates that perfectly, is Joe Sabia, a guy I met at TED. He was friends with the Airbnb guys, and they were setting that up. And when the Apple iPhone was launching, he booked a place in the queue for 4 days, paying the guy $400, and then switched places with him in an Airbnb T-shirt. And they always interview that person for national news. And he was just standing there with an Airbnb T-shirt saying, "Oh, I just used this new site called Airbnb and booked this thing." And then to go even further with that story and hijack another story, he said he lied about his name and said he was the engineer who lost the iPhone in the cafe, and that he had to be the first person to get the iPhone back. And that was national news for 6 hours, and then it became another story that a prankster had tricked the news into just hijacking the news for the day. And I guess Joe's done this many times. He's like a complete genius at this kind of stuff. And it cost $400, and it was national coverage for an entire day. So this is kind of the idea of putting yourself like almost like a parasite in front of somebody else's story. And that's just my favorite example of it. But you see different Kickstarter campaigns and how they do that. As I said, I didn't have press lined up when I started my campaign. I kind of, maybe 3 or 4 days in, I kind of tried to get certain kind of press. In the end, I didn't actually do the thing through distributed manufacturing, but I got a lot of press around the idea of distributed manufacturing, so it was kind of worth it from a marketing point of view to grab that press. But I kind of think of some campaigns, and like you might put a percentage on how you get different backers, and let's say friends and family will probably be some sort of small single-digit campaign and get really small on the bigger campaigns, and then you have a number of backers that are actually going to come on Kickstarter, and they're going to see you on the front page or see you through Kickstarter, and they have previously backed 10 to 20 campaigns on Kickstarter, and they're just going to back you because they like your campaign. And then you have the ones that you're going to drag to Kickstarter from PR results, from news stories, and that kind of thing. And then some campaigns might have some Google traffic, but that would only be true if they're not doing a new product. So if they were doing a standing desk and people are searching for a standing desk, you can drag them to your campaign. But a lot of the larger campaigns are very PR heavy. A lot of the smaller campaigns, I think, are more the local community and the friends and family. So I think they're very different, though, the big campaigns and the small campaigns, in terms of their structure. After the campaign, like my favorite after campaign strategy, I can't remember the name of the product, but it's this girls' tech product. And I don't know if they did this deliberately or not, but I've definitely seen big companies do this deliberately. They got sued by the Beastie Boys for using a song. And I think they did 500 orders on Kickstarter and 40,000 orders after being sued by the Beastie Boys. So the amount of press that they got from being sued by the Beastie Boys, and that could have been totally planned. I definitely know people who plan those kind of stunts. So that's kind of, the point is not to succeed. Well, one point is to succeed on Kickstarter, but then the point is, what do you do after Kickstarter? And to go from 500 orders to 40,000 orders within the month after Kickstarter, that's like an amazing kind of post-Kickstarter experience. But I think creating an after, if you are in the ability to fulfill orders, then it's kind of interesting strategies.
Thanks, James. So it sounds like you were sort of leveraging the trend of distributed manufacturing, but then you were also really inspired by these creative approaches to marketing. And this is actually perfect because it fits in with the topic of our last panel, which was guerrilla marketing and growth hacking. And it also brings to mind the idea that crowdfunding is not the goal, or gaining funding, raising money is not the goal. This is all part of a larger attempt to get people to know about your product, know about your company, and eventually make those orders. So we have 9 minutes left. I'm going to keep going with these questions that we got from the students and the questions that are being submitted right now through social media. This one is directed for you, James, because I saw in your blog post that your goal was about 40,000, or you raised $40,000 on Kickstarter, and this allowed you to complete 500 orders. And I know you mentioned that you want to do another Kickstarter campaign later on. So for you, how do you envision the timeline of raising different bits of money? Are these all for different projects, or do you see them as part of an effort to raise enough money for your venture?
I guess part of it, I wanted to own capital equipment and somebody else to pay for it. And I didn't want to take equity-based investment. So I did the Kickstarter, and then Startup Chili bought me a very expensive machine. And that way, I basically have everything I need to produce and fulfill a campaign of $200,000 without basically depending on anybody outside of my house. And I've kind of a little workshop there with the machine in it. If I did a larger campaign, I would probably need more than one machine, but then a larger campaign would allow me to do that. So it's, I guess I kind of want to do a series of projects all around the same method of manufacturing. So one leads into the other. And that's probably quite different to a lot of, because a lot of things about doing one product and doing it as a mass product. I want to do many projects all in wood, and it just becomes like 10,000 projects that goes beyond where woodworking currently is into offering a lot more choice.
Okay, I see. So
that's probably quite unique in a way.
It's just really interesting to see all the different motivations behind using crowdfunding. Johannes, do you want to...
There's the standing desk that I'm probably going to do.
Oh.
Since it's somewhere there, yeah.
I see it in the background there holding the books. Johannes, do you want to pitch in on the optimal amount to raise on crowdfunding sites? Have you seen a large range on WeMakeIt?
There is no such thing as an optimal amount to raise. It really depends on your projects and on your capability to reach out. For some people, $2,000 are a lot of money. For other people, $2 million are the right amount. So I wouldn't say there is like the right amount. It really depends on the product or the project or the audience that you have. So it's really very difficult to I cannot give a figure.
Okay, that's fair enough. And would you have any comments?
But there is a very simple calculation you can do. You can take like an amount like $10,000, and then you divide it through an average pledge on a website. For example, in the case of WeMakeIt, it's about $100. So this means you need 100 supporters to get $10,000, and then you can think about, well, can I reach 10,000? Can I make 100 people pay for what I'm offering? And maybe you say, okay, that's too much, or you say, no, I can easily reach 500 people and make them pay. So you really have to, form kind of a picture of your product, your possible clients, your community.
Great. Professor Tucci, do you want to comment on that? Because we do talk about identifying the backer profile in our week 4.
It's true. we discuss. We're going to discuss next week at length a couple different aspects of this question, and it's a complicated question that requires, sort of thinking this through, like, how much money do you want to ask for? Well, how much money do you need? Well, you have to think through your capital requirements and how much you're going to be spending over the next year or two, and how much can you possibly get from these various sources, and what's the optimal source, et cetera, for your particular business, of which crowdfunding is one little piece, and usually the smallest piece, in fact. And I know that we've had some great successes here with Pebble, et cetera. But in many cases, the crowdfunding piece is just to get you launched and to understand. And then, that's also used as your first marketing and your first test marketing. And that's why I thought was also very interesting about the panelists. Some of their comments here was how they were thinking about it in terms of marketing and fundraising at the same time. So knowing about who your backers are, it's also going to give you some indication of your potential market. And so it's a complicated scenario to think this through. I think we'll have a little bit more time next week. I don't want to eat up all the rest of the few minutes that we have here thinking about this, but we will talk this through in a lot of detail next week, and go through the different kinds of backers, what they look for, and also what they expect to receive from you when they are coming on to reading your particular project plan.
Thanks. So I want to leave the last few minutes then for our entrepreneurs to give some parting words of advice to the viewers. This video will be uploaded to the Coursera course and transcribed into French and other languages. So how can you decide whether or not to actually do a crowdfunding campaign? And then what is a last piece of advice for making it successful, whether it's managing the backer relations, managing the investor relations that come afterwards, or fulfilling your orders? James, do you want to start, and then we can go to Eric?
I would say, sort of when thinking about the campaign, I generally find it interesting or more relevant to think in backers than in dollars. You can think a lot more about shipping and warehousing and the amount of things you have to do. And from that, you can kind of calculate the size of your campaign and how much you'll do. I think it's really interesting to read the wallet post on the Kickstarter blog about just go do a wallet, which is seen as the sort of minimal amount of manufacturing that, minimum amount of work to really learn about manufacturing, that everyone should just, while a college student, do a wallet Kickstarter so they can learn a little bit of manufacturing, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of everything. And it's this sort of, there's a lot of interesting wallet projects to try be this, what was the chair in product design school of everyone should do one to learn a little bit about all the aspects. Because you can just go do one. It's not that hard, or it is hard, but you learn a lot.
So your advice is just go out there and try, look at all the products that are out there, and see what kind of experience you can get. So that's great advice.
Kind of do the small one and then learn the lessons and then go do the big one.
Hopefully our students will take that advice and use this to try out their project. In our course, we actually have the opportunity of offering $2,500 in seed funding to students who successfully complete the course and score high in their business composite proposal and final project. Eric, would you like to give any advice to our viewers who will be watching?
I think, having done this for I think it's just over 7 years now, I think one of the coolest pieces of advice that I got from Sam Altman, who's running Y Combinator right now, is he said, I mean, there's the classic YC piece of startup advice, which is make something people want, which can never be understated or underestimated. Making something people want is pretty much the most critical thing that you can do, especially in the early days. But the second thing that he shared was something interesting. He said, it's very difficult if you give up or if you stop working on a project. It's very difficult to succeed at that project. If you keep working on it and if you keep hammering away at it, you'll have a non-zero chance of success. And it's small, but important. And if you truly care about what you're working on and you really want to see it succeed, one of the most important things that you could do is not give up. And I think in the age of pivoting and in the age of always changing ideas constantly, there's something to be said for people who stick with it and truly, are passionate about seeing their ideas succeed. So I hope you stick with it.
Thanks so much, Eric. So we're unfortunately out of time, so I'm going to thank all of our panelists for spending an hour with us today. They have their Twitter handles there, so students can still shoot them questions. Maybe if they have time, they'll get a personalized answer. Also, I'll invite our panelists to our Facebook group in case they want to answer specific questions of our students. So again, thank you, Professor Tucci, for joining in. Thank you, Eric, for tuning in from California. Thank you, James, for coming in from Dublin. And the furthest person away, of course, is Johannes. Thank you so much for joining in from Zurich. I definitely hope to be launching my own platform, launching my own campaign one day in my life. Hope the students launch one on We Make It. I hope I get a chance to see one of these beautiful stools from James and own a pebble. So it's all coming up. This is very inspiring. Very inspiring. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Netra.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.